In today's divided times, there are some times when we need to have people on that are aiming to bring our nation together. And my guest today on the 149th episode of Stories of Service, People Who Do Extraordinary Work, is one of those people. Adam Boyd has spent years in law enforcement, and now he is on a new mission today. And we'll talk about that and so many other things as we get started into this conversation. But I thought that today would be an amazing time to reflect upon the ways in which we are as a nation divided, and then what is it that we can do to bring people together. Adam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing really, really good. I can't wait to have this conversation. And your background, the things that you're doing, the things that you have done, I think are going to be of great interest to our audience here. And I just can't wait to get started and have this conversation. So controlling ourselves in the most stressful situations, I think, is vital to a healthy life. We learn a lot from these people who do intentionally hard things, and the act of discipline trains us so that when life unexpectedly hands us a traumatic experience, we are prepared because we've intentionally put ourselves in those situations. Adam Boyd spent years in law enforcement, many of those years as a detective specializing in domestic violence cases before becoming a wellness coach. This episode now, though, will also delve on his latest project, Tour de Patriot, which will be an unprecedented 1,200-mile bike ride from the historic Folsom Tavern in New Hampshire to the charming city of Savannah, Georgia. And this grassroots effort is aimed to reignite patriotism, resilience, and the enduring spirit of the American people. And along this route, Adam's going to be talking to people who are at the heart of our nation's past and talking to people who are of different backgrounds and of different political affiliations. And Adam, I did just lose you there. You went black, so hopefully you're coming back. So I'm just going to keep reading your bio, and hopefully you will catch back up onto the screen here in just a moment. At various points along the journey, participants will engage with and interview patriotic Americans, individuals whose stories embody the principles and values that have fueled our nation's growth. Hey, Adam, are you still there? Hello. Adam, I think I might have, there you go. Now you're back. Okay. Okay. Are you there?
Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened there.
That's okay. That's okay.
I'm here.
All right. At various points along the journey, participants will engage with and interview patriotic Americans, individuals whose stories embody the principles and values that have fueled our nation's growth. These encounters will be an intimate glimpse into the lives of those who contribute to the ongoing narrative and what it means to be an American. Adam is the founder and CEO of Soulful Training, with over a decade of experience as a police officer, 3 years on the SWAT team, and 6 as a detective. He developed department wellness programs, trained SWAT teams, and revamped their PT applicant process. He holds certifications like the NSCA Tactical Facilitator, Harvard Business School's Leadership Resilience, FBINA Comprehensive Resilience Trainer, Wim Hof Level 1, XPT Performance Breathing Coach, AZ Post Physical Fitness Instructor, and is an ultra runner who has completed over a dozen ultra distances, including 2 100-mile runs. And this is what led him, this experience, to create Soulful Training's holistic wellness program for first responders, emphasizing physical, mental, social resilience, and purpose. He frequently teaches the Wim Hof method, a scientifically backed technique combining breathing exercises, cold exposure, and mindset to diverse groups, including medical professionals, SWAT, first responders, business professionals, and special forces soldiers. Welcome again, Adam.
Thank you again.
So first off, I want to go into where were you born and raised and what inspired you to start your working life in law enforcement?
I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. 2009, I made the journey out to Arizona. There was we had the 2008 crash, and there was not a lot of work available, and I was just kind of going through a tumultuous time in my life. And I had a friend invite me out to try something new, and I packed a bag of clothes, my dog, and $300 and hit the road. And within a couple months, I was able to make kind of a life for myself. My first job here was a personal trainer, and then I got hired on as a corrections officer. And about 15 months of that, I was hired on to the police department, where I ended up making a good career out of it.
Wow. What inspired you to go from, I mean, that is quite the shift from physical trainer to corrections officer. I mean, they're still somewhat related in terms of providing a service and being of service to others. in very demanding professions. But was it people that you would just meet, you were meeting along the way while you were living there, that introduced you to these different careers?
Well, it's something I always wanted to do. I went and got a justice studies degree. I attended Kent State University, and something that I've always wanted to do. And then I saw an opportunity present itself, and I took it.
Right, right. What were those years like, working as a correction officer? What were some of your roles and responsibilities?
I mean, as a corrections officer, you kind of did a little bit of everything. Some intake, you did work some of the pods, work the main control, and we kind of rotated every shift. But I really shortly realized like that life wasn't for me. It was not something that I was intending on doing a career in. I just needed something a little bit more stable, and I wanted to build my resume because ultimately I wanted to go into law enforcement, and I believe it was a great stepping stone, which allowed me to do that. And then
Mhm.
I spent a good, over a decade in that career, and I've met so many amazing people, and got to see and do a lot of really cool stuff. And then I eventually hit a point in that career where I knew it was time to move on.
What was it about it that you felt like, "Okay, I'm ready to make that transition out of law enforcement?" Was it just a lot of law enforcement professionals that I've talked to on the show say a lot of it's too just the day in, the day out, the grind and the trauma that they're that they're seeing every day, that it just starts to get to a point where it just becomes overwhelming. Was that your experience, or was it more just you were ready for a change and wanted to do something different?
I mean, if we did 12 shows, I could probably touch on each of my different reasons on why I left. I think there was, but I think it really boiled down to it wasn't in my purpose. I
Mhm.
don't know if law enforcement or really any other job was ever really for me. I really believe especially after I left, entrepreneurship is really the place that I was supposed to be. I've never really enjoyed working for somebody else. I mean, I got to do a lot of really cool stuff. I got to help a lot of people, but ultimately, having no ceiling on what I was doing and not having that control over my life is something that I wanted to remove. And I'm much happier in the role that I've taken as an entrepreneur versus the law enforcement career.
That's such a honest and authentic reason to do it too. I think so many of us want to take that jump into entrepreneurship, but we're worried about possibly the loss of income, the loss of not being on the team anymore, and it's just scary. It's scary to make that shift. When you decided that you were going to leave law enforcement, because you're a relatively young person and you were not, you weren't at the end of your career. You could have just kept going. And did you have a lot of people in law enforcement that tried to encourage you to stick around? And how did you handle that?
Almost everybody, including friends and family. I got you're only, so many years away from a pension.
Right.
And I was like, like, I mean, they all made very valid points. I was in a good position. I had kind of been leading our detective unit in the
I was gonna say
domestic
you were a
violence realm.
detective.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I had a great schedule, and it just wasn't enough. I think that it's kind of the same reason why people are like, why do you run ultra marathons? I'm like, I want to push the boundaries and see where I'm made of. Like I've been able to see my limits a couple times in the ultra world, and I continue to push those, and I wanted to do it in my professional life as well. And I kind of hit a bunch of goals in my law enforcement career. I did some teaching at the academy. I spent some time on SWAT. I got to be an investigator, and it was like I never really had aspirations to be, commanders and or the chief and like run a department. So I was like, well, do I just spend my next 9 years, just kind of skating through, or do I make the leap and continue to push the boundary?
I relate to so much of what you're saying, Adam. I mean, I feel I'm at that same place with my naval career. I've had this place where at the '05 level, all I can really do is go on to a combatant command and keep doing what it is I'm doing here. And I got to see at the NATO level at an international staff. To me, it was like the pinnacle operational job, regardless of how my community sees it, if they don't see it as competitive or not, whatever. It was really the most challenging assignment I've had to date. And so now I'm like, there really isn't anything else that I can think of that would really, really fascinate me about my community. And I think that's where you were too. You kind of saw the writing on the wall ahead of you and said, okay, this is not where I want to be anymore.
Yeah, and I think that everybody's journey is different. Where I was at could have been very fulfilling for a lot of people for the next 9 years, and like there's no right or wrong answer with this, right? Like
No, there isn't.
for a lot of people, like do your 20, 25, 30 years in the career. It's an amazing career, but for me, it was just not where I wanted to be, and I feel like that's okay for people to make that shift. And it's something like I've always been interested in the wellness space and the fitness aspect of it, and I saw an opportunity based on the skill set that I accumulated over several years, that I was like, I can really make an impact not only on myself but also those that serve, which is why that I take my programs and my workshops into military installations, into law enforcement, into fire, because those are the people that are so used to taking care of others that most of the time they forget to take care of themselves. And I still get to be a part of that community, but I just help out in a different way.
So how many years have you been running Soulful Training?
Operationally, about a year.
Okay. And
I had
tell
founded
me,
it about 3 years ago, but it kind of sat in the background. And I started while I was still employed. Got the LLC, so
mhm.
it's been a brainchild for about 3 years, but operationally about a year.
And tell me a little bit about how it works. So you do you go in and you teach at commands, or you go to a particular police department, and how do people request your services? Like, what's that process like?
Well, if you just go onto the website, you can fill out an informational card. You can reach out to me directly. Um, but the way that it works is we'll come in and we'll do usually I start with like a 1 day workshop, and
Hmm.
I allow the agency or the organization to pick exactly what they want out of it. Like if they're
Hmm.
like, we're really lacking in fitness, like we can do a fitness workshop. If we're really lacking in this area, so it really is dependent upon what the agency or what the organization needs, and if it matches up with the skill set that we have. One of my favorite things that I really enjoy teaching, because it was really one of the catalysts for me to leave the profession and go into business, is the Wim Hof method.
Right.
And for
And that's
those
what I
that
have up
don't
here on
know,
the screen. Yep.
and for those that don't know what it is, you've probably seen like cold exposure on Instagram or TikTok, and it's been like kind of all the rage the last year. And there's so many benefits to the cold, but people forget that there's two other elements to this method, and it's mindset and it's breath. And when you start combining all three of those things, we have the mindset to change the way that we think. And then we add in the breath. So a very particular type of breath work with the Wim Hof method is to stress the body out and then use our mindset and our own breath to learn how to relax during that initial stress response. And then we build on that and we go into the cold and we get an external stress response. The cold is an amazing stressor, right? So when you get in, you want your response is like that. Oh boy, like, you want to hyperventilate. And we're teaching you how to use your breath and your mindset to relax through a stressor. And that's very applicable to first responders and military because it's stressful. The job is stressful in itself. And I did a demo for the police academy here in Phoenix, and I put one of their officers in the ice tub. And he's like, you know what? They taught us about tunnel vision when I got through the academy. He's like, but I actually got to experience it. And I actually got to use my own breath and my mindset to work through it and to expand my vision in real time during stressful state. And he was like, this is really applicable to real life scenarios for law enforcement officers.
I feel like anybody could benefit from what you're talking about, though. I think that all of us face stressful situations, and stress is so relative. So, what is stressful for a SWAT or a first responder might be this extreme level of stress, but even the day-to-day stresses of parenting, or the day-to-day stresses of dealing with a coworker that you might not be getting along with but you can't escape from, those are all things that cause people stress. And to be able to do something like the Wim Hof method that's so present, that forces you to go through these steps, I feel like this is something that anyone could benefit from.
Yeah, I mean, well, I definitely target first responders and military, but yeah, anybody can benefit from these things, whether you're a parent or you work in an office or whatever your stressful job is. Like there's stress
Right.
all around us. And one of the other things that the cold does that most people don't even really think about is it really forces you to be present, because there's only one thought when you get in that water. It's cold, and I want to get
Hmm.
out.
Right.
And it really like dials in like where you're at, allows you to just to feel again. It allows you to just be in that moment, and we don't get a lot of that in this day and age.
No, we don't. In fact, yesterday I've been taking some ski lessons, and I was reflecting upon like when you're skiing, you really have to be very present or you're going to fall. I mean, it's just the bottom line. And and there's something to be said about an activity that requires your complete concentration. There's so many things that I feel, especially in this social media age, that we're only doing with like a little bit of our attention. We're always, constantly, at least I do anyway. And I think it's also because I have a lot of anxiety. I'm always sort of, hyper aware. I'm always like in my mind, I'm focusing on all these different things. And for me to have those moments where I can just center in, like you said, and have that tunnel vision, I think is very healthy.
It's extremely healthy. And the first time I went through a class, I had no idea what the Wim Hof method was. I had a, a SWAT team buddy of mine invite me to this workshop, and he didn't know what it was. And he's like, I just want somebody to go with me. My friend's hosting it. And so when I get there, the class is being taught by, he's a retired Navy SEAL. He's a former SWAT operator from the FBI. He had some TBI injuries from his time in combat. And he was telling a story about like it literally saved his life to practice this method. And then I went through the class and I left that day and I was like, oh my God, is this how normal I feel? Like I didn't even realize I felt bad. And then the rest of the day I was just in like this great mood, and I started practicing the method, and my wife was like, our relationship is changing. And it was like then it started to become like, I need to teach this to other people. Like if I benefit from it and this guy benefited from it, like who else can benefit from it? And then I went out and I got certified, and I realized through the 60 some odd other instructors that were there in Spain with me, everybody had a story. I had people that had kicked drug addiction and that saved them from suicide, and it helped with this and it helped with that. And I realized how powerful this method could be and how many lives it can save. And I really want to bring it back to our first responders and our military, not as a back end measure to save your life, but as a proactive measure to maybe to never get you to that point. And that's really the goal of the method for me, is to implement it for people so they don't ever have to feel what it's like to think those thoughts of like maybe suicide's the way. Maybe I need to end it all. And the way I really explain it is, I want you to armor your body and mind for that gunfight that's inevitably going to come. So if
Mm-hmm.
you have to get into a gunfight, do you want a vest and a helmet on, or do you want to go just like t-shirt and boonie hat, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
is the vest going to save your life every single time? No, but it's going to give you a hell of a lot better opportunity than if you just go into that fight with nothing.
I agree. 100% agree with you. And it just amazes me about all these different ways there are to heal ourselves that don't involve going to medical. I mean, I have people on like you on my show, and I'm like, I heard about this thing called ganglion block. It's like a shot that people can put like near their spine area, and it's supposed to somehow relieve the tension in your nerves. I'm probably describing it completely wrong, but it's just something I'd never heard of before. And it's another, or there's people that I don't know if that would be a good thing for me, given that I have addiction issues, but some people swear by ayahuasca, and they have gone on those paths. And all I'm trying to say is I'm making the larger point that I really, really wish that there was more education about these kinds of other methods of wellness, because I just don't think that a lot of people think to do what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, well, and there's not from a pharmaceutical standpoint, there's no money in it. If I could heal your anxiety and your depression through some mindfulness and some breathing and maybe some cold exposure, and I don't have to have you go on a pill for the rest of your life, and go see a counselor for the next 20 or 30 years. Like, people don't want that cure. Like I mean, I think individually we want that cure, but as an overarching society, I don't know if that's like the best thing if we can't push a, you know, a,
Right.
a lifetime treatment of per se.
But ultimately, what's interesting is that it's really just harming ourselves because people are going into debt with medical debt. I mean, that's a huge thing with veterans. That's another show I want to do about veterans and medical debt. It's a huge problem within the veteran community, and I really do believe that where would we be as a society if people prioritized fitness and wellness and, like you say, mindfulness, breathing exercises, all these things? What if everybody did this? Where would our health as a collective, if I just recently quit drinking. I do believe that also leads to a lot of problems in the military and in the first responder community. So it really makes you wonder where we would be as a society if we started to see that these things could make our lives better and they don't involve, like you said, taking a pill, going to the doctor. Not to say that there's anything wrong with those things, and I know they work for a lot of people, but there's other answers out there.
Yeah, and this is by no means is a cure-all type method. Like, there's going to be times where we need Western medicine, but what if it works? What if
Right.
it works for you? And then you now have this amazing practice at home. And, I probably practice 4 to 5 different styles of breath work, depending on what the situation is and what I'm trying to accomplish. The Wim Hof method is very specific. It's in its application. I know military and veteran first responders, they're taught combat breathing or box breathing. There's a bunch of different names for it. It has a very specific function and it's an amazing technique. But there's several out there that are going to be applicable in situations that aren't aligned with using box breathing. There's
Hmm.
everything has its shortcomings, right? Like, there's no perfect wellness modality, and the
No.
Wim Hof method is no different. So if you're practicing, box breathing in a certain scenario, or you're fit, or you're trying to work on your nutrition, like, try this method out. Reach out to me. I'll be happy to explain it to you, to give you some tips and tricks on how to do it. But try a bunch of different things. I know several people, again, this has saved their life, and other people are like, that was a cool experience, and they move on, and everywhere in between.
Right. And actually, we have somebody who joined the call who's had a question about the heat sauna and if this would be harmful, like going from extreme cold to extreme hot. Hello, Teresa and Adam. Can you tell me, after the extreme cold and working through that, do you go into a heat sauna or would that be harmful?
It wouldn't necessarily be harmful, but what it does is negate the effects of the cold. So if you want to do contrast therapy, you want to do the heat first and then end your practice with the cold.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you also think that saunas are good for us? I know for me, they just relax me, and my husband will just stay in one forever and come out just completely sweaty. I don't know. To him, he says it helps him. So for me, it's kind of relaxing for a little bit, and then I'm done with it. But what is your thoughts on that?
I'm a big proponent of saunas from a non-instructor. Like, I can't speak to it from the instructor side of it. I know a lot of people that there's a lot of benefits to it. They claim a lot of pros in their life, and I think there's a lot of research to say that saunas are very beneficial.
Hmm.
But I can't honestly speak on a very in-depth scientific manner on it.
Right. And I think that this is all goes into all these different wellnesses. I recently took a foam roller, a rollout class on the cruise ship, and I realized that, like, everything that I was paying for a masseuse, you can do with a foam roller. I mean, it was really enlightening, like, all the ways in which we moved on that darn roller that really hurt my body. I was like, well, not hurt, but you know what I mean, like, just rolled out and kind of stretched the muscles or whatever it did to get the blood flowing. I'm like, "This is like having a masseuse. This is like having a really hard massage." And it was like a light bulb moment, like, I'm paying close to $100 for a masseuse to do the same thing that I could just roll my body out on.
Yeah, and yeah. Once you start diving into stuff and you realize how much you can do on your own, and with anything, I'm sure the class was really helpful, and now you have
Sure.
that skill to take forward with you. And I always try to encourage people who want to try cold exposure breath work, take a class first, understand like how to do it properly from a professional, and
Yep.
then use that knowledge to move forward. I kind of equate it to like a deadlift, right? Like I can watch some videos on deadlifting, but when I do it in real life, I want to make sure that I'm going to do it properly, because just a little bit off can cause you a back injury, or make
Hmm.
sure you have really awesome glutes. And it's not really that big of a difference. Cold
Right.
exposure is kind of the same way. There is a right and a wrong way to do it. There's not a big contrast to right and wrong, and I wouldn't even say it's wrong per se. Let me rephrase that. If you want to max,
Oh,
if that makes
I
sense.
think I lost you for a minute.
No,
Oh, go
we're
ahead.
here.
Oh,
All
yeah.
right.
If you want to maximize, I heard
If you
that
want to
part.
maximize the benefit, there's a better way to do cold exposure. And I see the difference online all the time where people are getting in to suffer versus like teaching yourself how to relax. And that's really the biggest difference. You want to relax in the cold and not suffer, because our brains like patterns of behavior, right? So if we teach our body to suffer during stress, we're just going to learn how to suffer. And if we teach our bodies how to relax during stress, we're going to learn how to relax. It would be like if you chose to run a marathon or I forced you to run a marathon. The outcome of it is going to be completely different despite doing the exact same activity.
That's so true. That's so true. Your mindset is so important to how you approach different life events and stressful events. And I think one of the best ways that I approach stress is that I always try to make sense of it and gather meaning from it. So even if it's happening during the moment, I'm always thinking to myself, well, what am I supposed to learn from this? Where have I had a situation like this in the past? What can I do? What can I learn from what happened in the past, and how do I adjust that situation now to not make it as much of a stressful situation? And so I feel like I get a little bit better as the years go by with handling some of these stressful situations. Now, if this wasn't all enough, you've got this business going, you're doing these webinars, and I'm not webinars, but you're doing these courses where you go in and teach these classes and other things. And now you're this entrepreneur. And now you have another project called Tour de Patriot. Tell us a little bit about that.
So Tour de Patriot is going to be a 1,200-mile solo ride from New Hampshire to Savannah, Georgia. Um, Along the way, I'm going to be doing interviews with just regular Americans on what it means to be an American and what their biggest issue is, and how do you think we can bridge the gap in communication. Because I think that some of our divide is really just information based. We're one side's being fed this portion of information, this side's being fed this portion, and then we can't have a conversation about it. We're talking over each other, we're talking at each other, and I really want to try to uh, embrace some unity and try to get people to talk about how to move forward with our nation in a more positive way, because I think we're kind of just going back to negative. Everything's just, it's this side's fault, it's this side's fault, it's this, it's that, and nobody's really coming up with solutions. We're just kind of complaining.
I agree. And I think that we're more alike than we are different, but the media and other forces would have you thinking that we are not. And I think that there's money to be gained. There's advertiser. I mean, there's businesses who profit off of how divided we are. And I know that when you can divide people, you could, I think, more easily control them. And so I think that as a society, we have to come together, because there are so many things that are happening that I think cross political lines. Like there's issues out there that I think impact all of Americans, like issues when it comes to animals, issues when it comes to criminal justice, that I think are just so universal. And if we can unite around changing and making those issues better, I think we're more compassionate. Uh, we're just more decent as a society by doing that. So tell me a little bit about how you're going to do this. You're going to ride the bike and then you're going to meet with people, or how's this going to work?
Yeah, so I'm gonna start off in Exeter, New Hampshire, and I'm gonna ride. I have like 19 stops along the way, and then I'm gonna try to spend at least one day, sometimes 2 or 3 days, depending on how large the city is. And we're gonna go check out some historic sites. I want to bring to light patriotism from a grassroots level by showing like where we came from. Yes, we have some checkered past, and things haven't always been perfect. But instead of dwelling on the negative, I'd be like, hey, look at how far we've come. So instead of dwelling on what should have been, why don't we dwell on what could be?
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of showcasing, different the Washington Monument and the World Trade Center and the Statue of Liberty and the Freedom Trail in Boston and all the smaller historic sites along the way. I want to highlight those things for the American people to remember that those things exist and that we have a strong foundation of a country. And then while I'm there, I'm just going to stop random people. And just because I don't want this to be scripted, I don't want it to be planned. I want it to be real. And that's kind of what we're going for is, hey, so-and-so, would you mind having a quick conversation with me? And then we'll go into a couple questions and just kind of get the thoughts of the American people.
I love it. And you're going to be trying too to get people of different races, different ethnicities, different backgrounds. This is not going to be like you're particularly targeting Black people, you're particularly targeting Latinos. It's going to be just anybody that you come across, is my understanding.
Yeah, I want to target as many demographics as I possibly can because, like we touched on before, the idea is to showcase our similarities. And I think truly people just want to be left alone. They want to have their rights intact. They want to make sure that other people are protected and they want to make sure that we're all thriving. And I think that's really the end goal, whether you're left, right, center. We all want to thrive and we all want to have opportunity to not be discriminated against and to have our voices heard.
I agree. I 100% agree. I mean, when you think about how far we've come as a nation, we were a nation that once embraced slavery. We were a nation that at one time didn't have any freedom from England. We were under their control. We were a nation that did not give women the right to vote. We were I mean, there are so many rights. We were a nation that didn't allow homosexuals to marry. I could go on and on about all the things. Even in the animal world, we were a nation that would sell puppies out of the back seats of cars, and nobody batted an eye about it. I mean, there's just so many things that have advanced and ways in which we have become better. And I think that by you showing that, it's a great reminder of the things that we do have, like you say, that we still share and that we still hold dear as a nation. And I will tell you, by living overseas, there are so many people that want the best for the USA. Like they want us to continue to set the example. They see us as the most powerful nation in the world, and they see us as the strongest nation in the world. And sometimes I don't really fully appreciate that until living overseas and then seeing the fact that we are the example. And I see it as, well, we better hold their trust, and we better continue to stay together and to stay united. And when I see the things that are happening in the media and the political stuff, I get upset like you do, Adam, because I don't think that's really reflective of Americans at all. And I think that's sadly a mainstream media that has somehow lost its way. And I think that it's going to take people like yourself and hopefully people like me who are in the influencer slash podcast world to basically kind of call these people out and say, quit. We don't want this. This is not this. You guys are not reflecting us anymore.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I want Americans to understand is our power comes from the individual. And I think we're looking towards somebody else to solve our problems. And we need to look inward, gain the skills that we need to be successful, and gain the skills that we need to help our neighbors, and then teach them to have the skills to be successful. And if we really start coming together, like from a small community standpoint, we can make some big waves in this country and kind of realize that like we've been brainwashed to think a certain way. And I know when people think brainwashing, you think of like this dark alley, room, like, undercover operatives, like putting a thing on your head, right? But the way brainwashing works is through repetition. It's very, very simple. And
Yep,
I think people don't really understand that. Like I'm not we're all brainwashed because we
we
all have
are.
social media, we all have media, we all think a certain way. And brainwashing is seen as like this, you know, dark web type deal, and it's not. It's literally just seeing the same thing over and over again and teach you to think a certain way. That's all it is. And wellness is the exact same way too. Like that's the Wim Hof method. I put you in cold, teach you how to think a certain way and to calm the stress response, and over time that's what happens. And the same thing happens in politics.
I agree. And it's one of the reasons why, as an active duty member of the United States military, I feel it is so important for us to continue to use our voices, to have podcasts, to be civically minded, and to have conversations on hard issues. Sometimes there's people who criticize what I'm doing online, and it always perplexes me because it is the very reason we thrive as a society is by having conversations and coming to mutual understandings with one another, or coming to, maybe not even coming to agreement. I mean, I don't agree with every single one of my friends on every single issue, but I don't have to. We can still be friends and completely disagree on certain issues, and we don't have to not talk about it either. I hate when people say, well, oh, I just don't touch anything on social media that divides us. And I'm like, well, you're just telling me that you can't have a respectful conversation about two different perspectives on an issue? It makes no sense.
No, I think we have a big ego problem in this country, and we all want to be right, and anything that detracts from that, like, it hurts our feelings. You know, it's kind of funny. I was walking with my daughter through the park a couple days ago, and she wanted to ride on my shoulders, which she normally does, but I was dealing with a foot injury, so I couldn't throw her up there. And I tried to tell her, hey, you know, I can't have you go on my shoulders right now, but it helps you make your legs stronger, your heart and your head, and it's really good for you to walk. And she said, Daddy, don't tell me that. It hurts my feelings. And I was like, and I paused for a second. I was like, this is our entire country right now. We do not want to hear information that hurts our feelings or that goes against our own belief system. And it's okay to disagree on how to get there, but we're not even agreeing on factual things right now.
No, we're not. We're not. It reminds me, and here's a controversial issue for you, but it reminds me of this whole thing with the Last Supper and the Olympics thing, and how, I mean, I have no idea what the artistic director's original intent was, one way or the other, but the fact that you can have completely different truths about the exact same thing. And then in the back of my mind, what's sad is I kind of think both explanations are correct. Like, I have to wonder if they intentionally did it because they knew how it was going to be perceived, but then they knew that there was going to be an alternate explanation. And if that's the truth, how sad is that? I mean, that just tells me they must have done it to divide people to begin with. I mean, when you know that people feel a certain way about religion and they feel so passionately about certain things and what they symbolize, and then to say, oh, well, it was probably just a big Greek party. Okay, maybe it was. But did you not think about the fact that all these other people were going to perceive it this other way? And and why can't we have a conversation about that?
Yeah, I wish I had a great answer for you, and if I did, I would probably be in a. I don't know. I'd probably be a very rich man if I had all the answers, right?
Right.
But you know, and the example I try to use in this is, I don't want to dive into this topic at all, but abortion. Let's take abortion for example. I have one side that's saying my body, my choice, and the other side saying we think you're murdering a child. We're having a conversation that's not even the same conversation.
No.
And like we're just doing this, right? Like,
Yeah.
we have this side saying this, and I'm like, well, you guys aren't even talking to each other. You have a completely different belief on this, and you have a completely different belief on this, and like we're not even there's no middle ground there. Like,
no,
there's no commonality in that argument.
No. And I mean, it's one of those things where I tend to probably consider myself somewhere of somewhat of a moderate. I try not to sway too far to either side, because I think that when you have an extreme view and it's so rigid you can't connect to as much people. And I like connecting with people, and I like seeing my similarities in one another, and I like to see where I do have mutual ground with others. And so while I definitely question certain things and certain belief systems, like for an example, transgender in sports, I'm still not sure how I feel about that. And I'm not sure how I feel about transgender for younger children. I still feel that people should have the right to be and be called and be whoever they want to be. So my belief system is not this rigid thing where I feel like I'm a let's say what do I want to say unbreakable or I'm so rigid I won't change my mind on something. I know that life is about getting new information and being exposed to different perspectives, and I think it's sad when you lose the ability to do that.
Yeah, I mean the transgender issue is a kind of a hot topic right now, and you know it becomes, is that child that way or they've been taught to think that way, and both things depending on the situation are probably true. One
Right.
thing I've learned in my investigative career is every situation's different, all of them,
Mhm.
even when I dealt with the same couples in the exact same set of what seemingly is the exact same set of circumstances, there's still differences to it. There's still nuance to it. And you have to break down each individual situation separately. And it's like if you're grooming that young child to be something that they probably wouldn't otherwise be, there's an issue there. But if you are helping facilitate a child who believes that this is the way they are, you have a completely different issue there. It's the same thing that we just talked about running the marathon. Forced versus unforced, same outcome as two completely different situations. And I think we don't look at things that way. We just try to have like this overarching like view on something, and I'm like, well, it's really hard to have that view on, I would say, most things.
And I think that a big part of it too is to stop looking at things through your own lens and take a step away from the way that you approach things based on your upbringing, your background, and say, well, if I were in someone else's background and someone else's upbringing, I might see this situation differently. I might have a different way of approaching it. And I think that's a skill that we all need to know how to do. And that is where I think your bike ride is going to be so interesting, and the people that you talk to and the conversations that you have. And I hope that you do ask them about some of these issues, not necessarily the most hottest controversial issue, but I hope that you get into some of these deeper conversations where you talk about if they think America is really as divided as what they see in the news, or do they think people are more similar, and what are ways that they've connected with people that they thought they were so different from. I think those would be very interesting questions.
Yeah, we're going to ask some of those hot questions just because I want to get people to think about it from a certain way. So my role as the interviewer is going to probably be to play devil's advocate. So, and to get people to try to understand that, kind of go back to the transgender thing. Do you believe that a 25-year-old and a 5-year-old have the same, rights? And then you get to give your opinion, based on what you believe. But like, I want to know these things. Like, do you believe that a 5-year-old has the same cognitive dissonance as a 25-year-old?
Yeah.
The answer we all know is no. But um, I want to see where people are coming from, and then have them articulate why they believe that.
Yep. And there's so much, I think, from a scientific standpoint that we still don't understand when it comes to that. There's that one issue. I just saw something about an Italian boxer who just lost to an Albanian boxer who was a transgender female, but but her testosterone levels, I guess, disqualified her before, but then now she was okay. And I I'm just it's just so crazy. Like in my mind, I think it's so crazy, but I don't know the whole story either. I don't understand like if your testosterone levels are not to a certain point, then maybe you're okay from an athletic standpoint. I don't know. And so I think that's where I'm kind of coming from that issue is that I don't know how much scientifically it really makes a difference. It's just it's hard for me to understand how transgender women are competing against biological women. I don't know if I understand it, but I'm not hating on it at the same time, if that makes sense.
I mean, that makes sense. I can tell you, at least from from the physical training side, and there's a really good video of a mixed 4x4 relay, both professional and um, male and female athletes running 400 meters. And the biological difference between males and females is considerable.
I
And when it
know.
comes to sports, it creates a great disadvantage for women to compete against males. And I think in the sporting world, my stance is pretty like we need to separate that. And if we need a separate category, let's problem solve it, because I'm not trying to hate on the person who wants to compete, but we also don't want to make it unfair for the people that they're competing against. And I think a separate category may be a great solution for that. But there's definitely a big biological difference that gives an advantage to males over females in sports. Now, if we were talking about chess or something with it's just purely brain power, I think we can mix the two.
Sure.
I don't know enough about that. I think our mental capacities are right there. I believe a lot of studies say women are actually slightly more intelligent than men, so there might be an advantage there. But something where there's not a physical biological advantage, I believe we could talk about. But in a boxing like MMA type thing, there's a clear biological advantage for males.
Yeah, and I've heard the other side with the argument from the people who do support transgender in sports, something along the lines of if as they go through their process, their estrogen or their testosterone levels are no longer at a certain point, does that somehow equal out? And I don't know, and that's all I can say is I don't believe. I tend to agree with you, Adam, that I don't think it does, but at the same time, I'm not a scientist, and so I'm open to having the conversation. And that's where I wish the mass media would be at. Instead of just giving us the controversy, give us the conversation, give us the evidence, give us the studies that say strength to strength. And then maybe people would have a more rational discussion, and maybe some of these issues would push further. And I feel the same way about criminal justice issues. I feel the same way about animal protection issues. But the problem is, and this is where I think what you're doing is so important, and though I wanted to have you on the show and why I'm so passionate about podcasting, is because these are the kinds of forums that we can have these deeper conversations where we actually explore, okay, is there really a scientific difference when somebody starts to lower their testosterone? Is that enough to compensate to now where they don't have the strength or they don't have the muscle density that they're equivalent to, let's say, a biological female? I don't know the answer to that, but we don't even get to a place. Here's my point, and I'll shut up. But we don't even get to a place in mass media where that's the discussion. Instead, it's just this polarized. Oh, you either agree with it or you don't agree with it, and you don't agree with it, you're a pariah. If you do agree with it, you're okay, because that's sort of the mainstream narrative, is that you have to be okay with it. But there's no discussion about, well, what does this really mean? And so I hope one day that we get to a place where we can have those discussions.
I hope so, because the goal should be to protect men's sports, women's sports. And I think, again, we don't want to leave somebody out who wants to be involved in these activities, but maybe figure out a different way, and let's say, the science says, let's say the science says one thing, then what?
Right.
Then we have to figure out how to problem solve from there. And if you actually take a look at, I always use track and field as the example. The fastest 100-meter woman of all time, 10:49 is a 100-meter world record, wouldn't even be in the top 8 at a lot of the California high school state championships. And I think that gives us a pretty good idea of where we're at on that.
I think so. I think, as you said, one of these days, and in fact, I have a friend who's transgender, and it is on my bucket list to have more of a transgender doctor, because I do want to talk to somebody, though, because I tend to agree with you, Adam. I'm 100% in your camp on this, but I want to hear the other side. I want to hear okay, well, maybe when they go through the transition process, there's some sort of a decrease in muscle density and they lose some of these, some of this stuff evens out. And if like you said, that is the truth, well, then we problem solve it and we educate on that, and it becomes a shared understanding. But I wonder if it really isn't a shared understanding, because why would people like Riley Gaines, I think is her name, the USA swimmer, why would somebody like her become so prominent and become such a voice in getting some of these permissions scaled back? And so that's where I question those kinds of things. But I know this has been such a rabbit hole, but that's one wonderful part about podcasting. I think that getting back to what you're going to be doing as you go across the country, not just talking about this issue, but talking about a lot of these kind of divisive issues. I think it'll be interesting if you can have these conversations in a way that's not divisive, where people are just thoughtful and they talk about how they feel about issues.
Yeah, and just to try to have some understanding. And I think, we can come to the initial agreement of like, I don't want to discriminate against transgenders who want to participate in sports, but I also want to make it fair. So we start from that point. I think it opens that door to have a more open conversation of like, this is where I'm coming from on the issue, and I would really like to solve this where everybody's happy. And some of us may have to take some concessions here and there because that's what compromise is, right? Like there's not a person on this planet that I have the exact same views of,
Right.
about life. So like we're all going to look at things just a little bit different of how do we come to an agreement where, okay, we can all live with this.
Right, right. And that's what good lawmaking and policy is all about. It's about figuring out what is the best policy that'll help everyone win. And sadly, sometimes that's not the policies we see out here in England. They just added another dog to this bully breed, XL bully breed ban list, and it doesn't solve the root issue of dangerous dogs, which is
No,
holding. Oh, it's so ridiculous. It doesn't solve the problem.
yeah, and I think that's what we've gotten away from. Like we want to coddle our feelings and we want to put a band-aid on things, so to speak, instead of like looking at the root problem. Like where's the problem coming from? And
Yeah,
I think once we can take a good hard look at that, we can come to a better place. And
I
and
think
this
so.
misinformation we see out there is not helping.
No.
I'll take a quick example: the Supreme Court ruling that just came out on presidential immunity. I read all 118 pages of the ruling, and I came to my own conclusion based on what I read. And then I started seeing like wild things put out online, and I'm like, none of this is true. And I'm like, and none of you know how the Supreme Court even works based on the articles that I've read. And like, read it for yourself, come to a conclusion. And I made my own conclusion, but it was very easy for me to see how someone would have an argument that would contradict what my opinion was. And it wasn't that hard to see. But there are so many things that came out. I was like, well, that's not what this ruling says at all. Like, it wasn't even like a debatable thing. I'm like, this is completely false, specifically to divide us. And until we can reel that in, we're going to continue going down this path.
I agree. I agree, and I think that's why people like us are so important to counteract sadly this news narrative that's making money off of this division and is getting eyeballs and getting advertising dollars. And little shows like mine might not be the most popular shows out there, but I'm going to keep doing it because I know how important it is to have to have these kinds of voices that can counteract some of this ridiculousness. And I mean, that's all it really is just it's noise. And when I watch it, I get frustrated. Like even after the assassination attempt, and then after the debate. I mean, both things were just so divisive. With the debate, oh God, all the political attacks. I mean, I'm sorry, personal attacks on Biden, and then all the different ways in which the assassination was characterized. And it was just both of those things are just very tragic things that need to be dealt with in a human and in a compassionate way. I mean, if Biden really does have some sort of mental capacity limitations, that's something that should be dealt with compassionately, and it's something that should be talked about in a respectful way. And the fact that the president was pretty much former president was almost killed, that also needs to be a serious thing that has to be dealt with in a compassionate way. And it's like we've lost our way in talking about these things in a way that is respectful and is truthful about each of these situations. And so, like you, I just hope that we get to a place where we can have respectful conversations about issues that matter.
Yeah, and that's really the whole goal of the tour is to go through. New Hampshire has a different culture than Georgia does, and DC has a different culture than both of those do. And I'm going to get through the 13 original colonies, which is very I wanted to bring this back to the beginning, right? So that was kind of the point of this whole thing. but I also want to talk to people from different backgrounds and different parts of the country. And I want to get everybody's perspective and see if we can create some common ground, which
I love it.
we literally don't have right now.
And if people want to, like businesses are interested in being a part of this or checking you guys out, can you tell me a little bit about, they just can reach out to you through the website?
Yeah, if you go onto the tourtopatriot.com, there's a bunch of different ways people can get involved. If you own a business, I will take corporate sponsorships. I have packages set out, but if we can also do something custom. If you want to donate, there's a link to donate. If you want to do a virtual ride, you can ride virtually. If you want to buy one of my programs, you can do that as well. All of it is going to help facilitate the project. And then some of the proceeds are going to go support first responders and veterans. I partner with Tomorrow Battalion, which is a nonprofit that gives back to those communities. And, we really just want to see great things for our country, great things for our veterans and our first responders, and hopefully make a difference in this world.
Awesome. Awesome. Is there anything else that I didn't touch upon that you want to say before we get off the call?
No, I think we covered everything. I really need your help on this. So if $5, $10 donations, please just give back to help facilitate this project. It's going towards a good cause, and I would really love to speak to all 350 million of you. But if you do want to do a live on Instagram, I'm happy to do a live with anybody who's listening, and please feel free to reach out on Instagram.
I love it. I love it so much, Adam. I think what you're doing is great. It's such it's grassroots advocacy at its finest, and it's the power of community. And I'm really happy you reached out to me. And when I knew you were doing this, I knew I had to get you in on season 2 before I go on my hiatus, because I think this is so important, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about it.
Thank you. Yeah, we're looking forward to the project, and it's really a show of. I really wanted this to be symbolic of what one person can do. So I think a lot of people feel disenfranchised and be like, "What is one vote? What is this? What is that?" And part of the reason I did this solo was to show that one person can make a difference.
I love it. All right. Well, I'll meet you backstage to say goodbye. I'm going to go full screen. But thank you so much, Adam. This has been an amazing conversation, and I really enjoyed talking to you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I will have 2 or 3 more shows. I said I was going to stop August 1st, and then, I'm going to go until the end of August now. I added a few other shows. So September will be my hiatus month, and then I'll get back into season 3 come this October. But as I always say to close out these calls, first off, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for supporting the show. You can like me on Facebook, LinkedIn. You can subscribe on YouTube. And as I always close out the call, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Have a great day. Bye-bye now.